Hello and welcome to SPARKS. I'm Paul, and in this video I'm going to be talking about 1994's Gratuitous sax and Senseless violins from a meta perspective, because it's my theory that all SPARKS albums from 1979 at least are concept albums where the concept has been kept a closely guarded secret. And it can almost always be tied to SPARKS' own artistic ambitions and their creative processes. They're a band that keep on reinventing themselves, and the lyrics to these albums mirror how the band present themselves at the time. So with this in mind, let's look at Gratuitous sax and Senseless violins, which has got many songs on it which relate to fame. And of course this is a well-trodden subject in pop music. But nobody's got a relationship with fame quite like Ron and Russell Mael, so it's worth paying close attention to what they have to say. And this is apparent on the main single from the album, the fantastic When Do I Get to Sing My Way. So the song it's referencing is of course My Way, made famous by Frank Sinatra, and this is a song that takes a certain level of notoriety or gravitas to sing. It's a song for legends. And of course SPARKS are legends, but in 1994 it just didn't look like that. Back then they'd just wasted 5 years on an abandoned movie project with Tim Burton, My the Psychic Girl. The few albums before that had been flops, so it had been a long time since they'd had a hit record. So this song is from the perspective of somebody wanting recognition, wanting fame. And what's amazing is that this song granted that wish for them. It was a huge hit in Europe, and it made it clear that SPARKS were a band who was still worth watching even this far into their career. But where it gets really interesting for me is the verses to this song, because it's not just about wanting fame, it's a song about wanting another shot at fame. It makes more sense to read it as being from the perspective of somebody whose star has faded. So with that in mind, this is how the song starts.
No use in lecturing them or in threatening them. They will just say, who are you? Is that a question or not? And you see that the plot is predictable, not new, but just as stunned at the things you will do.
The song opens with the character being on the losing side of an argument or a failed negotiation, and all the other person has to do to put him in his place is to say, who are you? And of course this is calling him a nobody, but what if he used to be a somebody? What if he had a hit record 10 or 20 years before this? In that case, the other person would know who he is. Hence the line, is that a question or not? So is he being called a nobody, or is he being called a has-been? Well, this is revisited later on in the song.
Yes, it's a tradition, they say, like a bright Christmas day, and traditions must go on. And though I say yes I see, no I really don't see, is my smiley face still on? Sign your name with an X, mow the lawn.
The line, sign your name with an X, I take to mean signing an autograph, with the X being a kiss. So it's the sort of thing that a famous person does, but not that famous in this case, because he still goes home and mows his own lawn. And that's hardly the sort of thing that a superstar does. I mean, I can't imagine Elton John mowing his own lawn. There's that line, it's a tradition they say, like a bright Christmas day. And a tradition is something from the past that you just kind of repeat for the sake of it. So it's almost like this fan who's asking for an autograph only knows them from when they were famous first time round, and when he finds out that they're still going, he says, oh, it's great, you know, traditions must go on, as if they're basking in their former glory. And that could be really hurtful, but because this person's a fan, you know, you'd still be polite. So, you know, is my smiley face still on?
Good game. But now it's time for music. And with their latest record called Tryouts for the Human Race, let's have a great crackerjack welcome for SPARKS!
Here's a clip of the band from 1979 on BBC Children's TV programme Crackerjack. Somebody on the show was clearly a fan because just a few years earlier they did this.
Something for the girl with everything. Have yourself a treat, my dear. Don't try to talk, my dear. Your tiny little mouth is full. Here's a flavor you ain't tried. You shouldn't try to talk. Your mouth is full. Something for the girl with everything.
Now that's a pretty painful video, but it does shed a different light on how When Do I Get to Sing My Way ends. The words are, but I have no souvenirs of these crackerjack years, not a moment I could choose, and not one offer for I could refuse. So maybe the crackerjack years is looking back to these 1970s appearances on BBC TV. Now let's have a look at some other songs on Gratuitous Sax and Senseless Violins that share the same themes.
Because the Liberace keeps on hanging round, hovers over farmland, lingers over towns. Because the Liberace still has that mystique. If we were alive, he'd now be at his peak. Because the Liberace.
We can make the case that When Do I Get to Sing My Way is delivered by a has-been rather than a nobody, and this would make him comparable to Liberace. For those that don't know, he was a pianist and a singer and an all-round entertainer who was once the highest paid performer in the world, but over time his act grew cheesy and he fell out of fashion. The joke here is that he keeps on hanging round, he's outstayed his welcome. This is comparable to where Sparks found themselves in 1994, and just like Sparks, the character in this song has his fortunes turned round. He wins the audience's approval.
He hums a Vita in Moon River and Michelle. Maybe that's why the people scream out, go to hell. Oh no, now they're throwing cans of beer. Oh no, I thought those could disappear. But he remains in all his glory. It's so strange. These aren't the kind of people that he can change. And wait, now they're starting to applaud. Guess there really is a God above.
Like in When Do I Get to Sing My Way, this is a case of life imitating art. You have this performer who's fallen out of fashion and is well past his sell-by date, but he wins the audience around. And this is exactly what happened to Sparks with the album that you're listening to. And it's no coincidence, because this is something that comes up elsewhere on the album.
What's she doing now? Has the encore come yet? And the bravas and bouquets. Don't tell me, don't tell me. Someday I'll find a mind of my own. Till then, I'm content to hear her say, I thought I told you to wait in the car.
Here's another character who's got an outsider's perspective of fame. This time it's a guy with a superstar girlfriend, but she's embarrassed to be seen with him, so he's forced to wait outside in the car while she performs concerts and goes to lavish parties. So why is she embarrassed? Well, we can speculate that maybe he's a has-been like these other characters. And like Liberace, he moves towards the spotlight. In the second half of the song, he enters the party, so it's taking that same step towards fame. And here Russell sings, in my wildest dreams I never thought of Warren Beatty as a rival. And that's a really interesting comparison, because Warren Beatty was like an elder statesman of acting. He was like an older heartthrob, and just recently he'd made a successful comeback, and this is exactly what Sparks were endeavouring to do at the time. So now let's wind back to a year before the album and look at a one-off single called National Crime Awareness Week.
In theory, yes, I abhor the violence. In practice, well, sometimes they freak. You honor me, I feel unique. It's National Crime Awareness Week. You honor me, I feel unique. It's National Crime Awareness Week.
This one-off single was released a year ahead of the album Gratuitous Sax and Senseless Violins, and it defines the sound that was to follow, but it also sets up a number of themes that carry across from this song onto the album itself. It's about a criminal who loves it when news of his crime is reported in the media. So National Crime Awareness Week would be that time when he gets the most attention for his dodgy misdeeds. And in a way, that's another outsider's perspective on fame, just like all of these other songs I've been talking about. So again, this can be tied to Sparks, because at the time, as I've said, they were deeply out of fashion. There's nothing less cool than a band who have outstayed their welcome. So this character is defiantly proud of what other people see as crime. And of course, National Crime Awareness Week is the short amount of time where he gets the most attention. So this is akin to Sparks appearing in the media to promote what they do. The song can also be connected to the title of the album that follows. It references Alfred Hitchcock's movie Psycho by using the same piercing string sounds from the soundtrack, and it also makes reference to the famous shower scene. Now that is the epitome of gratuitous sex and senseless violence.
The music, the curtains drawn back, the water turning red. Don't blame that on me. I ain't no Tony Perkins. I'm saner than you are. I know that for a fact.
So what's this horror show imagery all about? Well, again, Sparks are joking about looking to the world like a horror show. This band from the 70s who still think that they can make it in the 90s despite not having a hit for years. So they make it clear though that the problem isn't with them. They say every time you shower, are you waiting for the music, the water turning red, the curtains drawing back, evoking the shower scene imagery. But then they say, don't blame that on me. I ain't no Tony Perkins. I'm saner than you are. I know that for a fact. So they're saying that they're not psychos. The problem is with the other person. And what's more, they don't care about this bad reputation. They say on and on, the world keeps spinning, on and on, I keep on winning. So they're perfectly happy with all of this.
I'll put it to you this way, I love to take chances. I'll put it to you this way, I'm a happy guy. I'll put it to you this way, I love little headlines. Unknown Caucasian strikes one more time.
So Sparks are a band that love to take chances, and they're happy guys despite being painted as nobodies or outsiders by the media. That headline, Unknown Caucasian Strikes One More Time, that can be applied to this very song. And there's also interesting lines that bookend the song that kind of suggest that they knew it wasn't going to be a hit single. That was never the intention for this song. It starts with, "This is a case of passion over reason. This is a case where your shoes don't need a shine. Give me some space, man, to practice my profession. I've got the ace, man, and what is yours is mine." So to practice your profession, in the case of Sparks, is to develop a new sound and a new look, and to get them ready for the prime time. And at the end of the song, they sing, "Maybe next year I'll break my streak during National Crime Awareness Week. But for now, I've got Mystique during National Crime Awareness Week." So, as we know, the following year, they did break their streak. They had another hit record. Then, this is a song that deals with headlines. It's also there in the music video. Now, headlines are a theme of the artwork for Gratuitous Sax and Senseless Violins. But rather than condemning the band with Unknown Caucasian Strikes One More Time, this time it's more like gossip columns. It's salacious, and that suggests a step towards the spotlight, like we've seen on these other songs. Finally, there's the subject of media. That also comes up on Gratuitous Sax, but this time it's not condemning these criminals. This time, Sparks are in control of the media.
What was I thinking? What was I thinking? What was I thinking? What could I have been thinking? It's going one time, it's going two times. So to the gent who was the took it off their hands, a £5 note was changing hands. As I took it off their hands, I had plans, I had plans. Now that I own the BBC, what am I supposed to do with this thing? Now that I own the BBC, what am I supposed to make of this thing?
This is life imitating art once again. Sparks have gone from media outsiders to owning the British Broadcasting Corporation, and this runs parallel to the increased marketing budget around the album. It featured 3 glossy music videos, each receiving good airplay in Europe. For the first time in a long time, Sparks were getting the heavy promotion that they deserved. This was a world away from the last appearance on UK television, where they were forced to improvise a music video due to limited funds from the label. Each of the characters we've discussed so far are outsiders taking steps towards fame or media power. And to me, that makes this album a concept album. And what's the concept? It's Sparks' own comeback. It's a concept album about a comeback album, which to me is meta in a mind-blowing way. Now, the other songs on the album don't address these same subjects. They're about all kinds of things, but they can still be tied into the same narrative. In fact, I'd go further than that, because the remaining songs on the album explain why Sparks are doing this. They don't want fame for the sake of fame. They've got objectives that they're working to. So this is best explained with the songs that bookend the album, each of which is a short skit, neither of which are longer than about 30 seconds. But they put the whole album into context. So let's take a listen to how it starts.
You need it, you're the relevant, you need it right away. What should I do? What should I do? An element to tiddle it so they won't go away. I thought of you, and now you're blue to you were blue, and now you're blue to you were blue, and now you're blue to you were blue. Throw in some gratuitous sax.
So this song also fits the narrative of a band really needing to make a comeback. If you watch the Sparks Brothers documentary by Edgar Wright, you'll know that this point in their career was really difficult for Sparks because they'd just lost all this time on the abandoned My the Psychic Girl movie project, but they say they'd put all their eggs into that basket, so Sparks were as close as they've ever been to completely coming off the rails, and it would have been the end of a lesser band. So they really needed commercial success. So the line is, you need another element, you need it right away, so there's an urgency to it. Then it's an element to titillate so they won't go away, as in they want to keep an audience. The new element turns out to be a saxophone, and I'm going to assume that this is a reference to jazz pioneer Charlie Parker, because not only does he appear in the title of track 3, he also suffered from severe depression, and the line here is, I thought of you and how you blew till you were blue, and blue of course is another word for like sadness. Now there's no obvious influence from Charlie Parker on this album, in fact quite the opposite. This is all like Europop, and there's not a hint of jazz on the album. So why are they thinking of Charlie Parker? Well, let's take a look at his career. Charlie Parker had long held ambitions to fuse his genre of jazz with classical music, with strings, and he didn't accomplish it in his lifetime. But Sparks did accomplish something very similar. They fused their type of music with strings and produced Little Beethoven. Now keep that in mind as you listen to the last song on the album, which is Senseless Violins.
He came home, and instead of hearing the usual drums and bass, he heard
Violins, violins, violins. Senseless violins, senseless violins, senseless violins.
Taken together, The songs that bookend Gratuitous Sax and Senseless Violins, and by extension the title of the album itself, can be seen as a reference to Charlie Parker and his desire to fuse jazz music with classical music. And this is similar to what Sparks achieved themselves with Little Beethoven a few years later. They fused their own brand of pop music with classical music. Now, this song works as a kind of basic template for Little Beethoven because it's stripped down with violin sounds and operatic vocals over it. If you think forward to the opening track of Little Beethoven, on the Rhythm Thief, they drop the drums, they drop the bass, they have the similar operatic style, but it's not just that. It's the fact that they're singing about this change in their own music. They're saying, oh no, where did the groove go? And on this song, on Senseless Violins, they're singing, instead of the usual drums and bass, he heard senseless violins. So here's my theory, and it's a kind of alternative history of Sparks. This song was intended to be a segue into the album they wanted to make next, which was Little Beethoven, or something close to it. Instead, they were coerced into re-recording the greatest hits for their German record label. The opening song of Plagiarism is a new version of Pulling Rabbits Out of a Hat, and that follows this same template. It's all strings, it's got no drums apart from the timpani drums that you find later on Little Beethoven as well, but it's got no bass either, and it has similar stacked vocals.
Around the sun and the moon, I'll hold the world in my hand.
So there's a continuity between Senseless Violins and the start of Plagiarism. Now, I know a lot of Sparks fans will be shouting at their screens because Sparks have claimed that they invented the sound for Little Beethoven sometime after 2000, after throwing away an album's worth of dance pop material. But to be frank, I just don't believe that. This is the band that said that their mother was Doris Day and that they used to be catalogue models. I think there's a far more interesting story that they've just chosen not to share with us, and maybe we'll hear it from them another day. So let's take a look at the remaining songs from Gratuitous Sax and Senseless Violins in the context of a band who are trying to re-establish themselves, who are chasing fame, not just to get famous, but to get the band in a position to be able to record something as bold as Little Beethoven.
Out of the doorway into the morning, wish I was a bird that was migratory, spoken half in jest. Catch the bird that's in my nest. Out of the doorway into the morning, all of them seem to be selling something illegal substances. Oh, but now we're with no kisses.
That's the opening verse to When I Kiss You, I Hear Charlie Parker Playing. And there's some great punning going on here. Charlie Parker had a nickname. He was widely known as Charlie Bird Parker. And the line is, catch the bird that's in my nest and wish I was a bird that was migratory. But you can also derive meaning from it. To wish that they were migratory means they wish they could go somewhere else, but they have to catch the bird that's in their nest. And that's an opportunity that's come their way. And to get this opportunity, they have to go to somewhere where everyone seems to be selling something. So my guess is that the opportunity was to sign with Logic Records. Now, this was a label that was known for really commercial dance music. They'd had huge smash hits around the world with the likes of The Power by Snap and records by Hadaway and Dr. Alban. So Sparks were moving into this highly commercial Europop music. And they see this place as being akin to some criminal landscape where everybody seems to be selling something, illegal substances or an hour with no kisses. So that's the crime of drugs or prostitution. So it's as if they're saying that they're happy to sell themselves for now, but they are keeping something back, as we hear in the next verse.
No, I am tempted, they have preempted. You and your rosary are exempted from criminality. Still there is a duality. You'll never know it, I'll never show it. Only I hear it, only I know that what's apropos for me may believe me blasphemy. And the hills are alive with the sound of music.
I I think this verse is about a negotiation with the record label, but Sparks come prepared because they say, though I am tempted, they are preempted, so they're one step ahead. They say you and your rosary are exempt from criminality, so they're holding something back, this rosary. Now, a rosary is a series of prayers that you repeat and you count off using rosary beads, and I think that's a really neat metaphor for an album. The songs that make up an album are akin to the prayers that make up the rosary, and both take you on a kind of journey. In both cases the sequence is really important, and there's a kind of sanctity that plays well against the criminality that's brought by the record label. This world where everyone seems to be selling something, illegal substances or an hour with no kisses. You've got this rosary which is pure, and I see that as being little Beethoven. Sparks have got the idea for the album, or maybe even these songs, but they're not offering it to the record label. Instead, they're saying you and your rosary are exempt from this criminality. But still, there's a duality. By this they mean that even though they're making this Europop music, which isn't necessarily where they want to go, they're still saying two things at once, and hopefully this is what I'm laying out for you here. There's more religious language with the line, what's a pro for me, may for thee be blasphemy, and that translates to what's appropriate for Sparks may to this record label be blasphemous, as in, if Ron and Russell Mael went to Logic Records and tried to get a deal on the back of an idea like Little Beethoven, you know, like neoclassical, pop, hybrid, whatever the hell that album is, they'd have been laughed out of the building. So they promised to deliver this Europop while holding back their grand opus. Another line that really resonates for me is, you'll never know it, I'll never show it, only I hear it, only I know it. So it's like music that only they can hear, and they're not sharing with their record label. The label doesn't even know that they're being used to get to this point where Sparks can do the music that they really want to do. And that sentiment is carried over onto the song See No Evil, Hear No Evil, Speak No Evil.
I'm the wife of Clinton. I don't have the proper way. All of this. They come and go. Of course, I do. I know everything. You don't know my thinking, who I dream of, all the gifts that I bring. One thing is clear, the atmosphere is thick and it's cold.
This song is delivered by three different powerful female figures, starting with the First Lady of the day, Hillary Clinton. In it, she turns a blind eye to her husband's infidelity because she's got her own ambitions and she doesn't want to let that stand in her way. Now, interestingly, it predates both the Monica Lewinsky scandal and her own presidential bid, so it's a verse that's aged incredibly well. But how does it fit into the big picture? Well, these characters, particularly Hillary Clinton and Madame Mao from the first two verses, they would typically be seen as underdogs because they're victims of infidelity. But victim is really the wrong word here, because that's far from the truth, because they hold all this power. So usually you'd see somebody whose husband has cheated on them as being lower down in the power dynamic, but that's just clearly not the case. It's about the power that they yield in secret. And it's an album with lots of underdogs on it, from the guy in When Do I Get to Sing My Way, who dreams of stepping into the spotlight, to Liberace, who's seen as a joke until he's accepted by the audience. The guy who has to wait outside parties in the car until he ventures in and is accepted alongside them. So this is about underdogs having this power. There's a line that really strikes me, which is, "You don't know my thinking, who I dream of, all the gifts that I bring," which is obviously about being underestimated and keeping this knowledge to yourself. And it's really similar to the line in When I Kiss You, I Hear Charlie Parker Playing, because there they say, "You'll never know it, I'll never show it, only I hear it, only I know it." And of course I was interpreting that as being about knowing the plans for little Beethoven and knowing how powerful an idea this is. So this can all be interpreted as being about Sparks keeping information from their record label, because knowledge is power. And there are some really interesting double meanings in some of these lines. Madam Mao sings, "I know the score, all this and more, they're still in their teens." And obviously that sounds like this really creepy thing with a husband sleeping with young girls, but it can also be joking about how Sparks see the people who work in the record label, because, you know, they were in their 40s or 50s at this point, so they would have seen the people in the label as still being in their teens. And ultimately the song is about not being underestimated, and they deliver this in a great closing verse where they paint themselves as being Cleopatra. This final verse turns the power dynamic on its head. They're no longer underdogs, they instead cast themselves as Cleopatra, and of course she held power over several relationships. So by signing Ron and Russell Mael, the record label has bitten off more than they can chew. Things are looking bright for Sparks, and the last 3 songs on the album are looking forward to where they go next.
I'm Jihad. I'm a film director. I made several films. I'm Jihad. I'm a film director. I won several awards for my films.
This was made in collaboration with acclaimed Hong Kong film director Sue Hark. At the time, they were planning on making the soundtrack to his upcoming movie, Knockoff. Ultimately, they only did a few songs, but this is calling forward to a future movie project, and in that respect, it has a lot in common with When You're a French Director from 2017. That featured guest vocals from Leos Carax, who went on to direct their debut movie, Annette. This is a song about being somewhere bleak and miserable and dreaming of home in the California sun. And in that respect, it reminds me of California Dreaming by the Mamas and the Papas. And I think this is an intentional comparison because the opening lines to each of the songs has grey skies in common. So California Dreaming starts with "All the leaves are brown and the sky is grey." And this song starts, "Rain is pouring down in this landlocked town, skies are always grey, let's go surfing, babe." So it's a song about homesickness, but it can also be seen to be about creativity and creative freedom, using the metaphor of surfing. The line is, "Grab our boards from the back of the van, paddle out till we can't see the sand, spin around and drop into a wave we hope will never end." And surfing is a lot like the creative process in that you have to put yourself into the right place and be there at the right time. And it's this balance between control and surrendering yourself, like going with the flow. So being in this bleak place and looking forward to a time where you can surf this wave of creativity is like Sparks looking forward to being free of these record company constraints and to be able to do what they want to do. And this isn't the only time that creative freedom can be connected to home as a metaphor. In fact, it's a really long thread that goes through a lot of Sparks music. And to illustrate this, let's look at the album before this, which is 1988's Interior Design. It's my theory that the title of that album is because it was recorded in their home studio. It was the first time that they didn't have to go out somewhere to record and could work to their own schedule. So it was a big step forward for the creative freedom, hence the name Interior Design. Then, after the movie project failed with Tim Burton, they had problems, and that is illustrated in one of the final verses of the song When Do I Get to Sing My Way.
This home which once was serene now is home to the street and to lying plates and shoes. But I have no souvenirs of these Cracker Jack years, not a moment I could choose, and not one offer that I could refuse.
While this works as a great insight into the character in When Do I Get to Sing My Way and his troubled home life, it also serves as a metaphor for where Sparks were creatively. They still had all this creative freedom working at home, but they had zero interest either from the public or from record labels. So this home which once was serene now is home to the screams and to flying plates and shoes. Then it continues on the next song.
Out of the doorway into the morning, wish I was a bird that was migratory, spoken half in jest. Catch the bird that's in my nest. Out of the doorway into the morning, all of them seem to be selling something illegal substances. Oh, but now we're with no kisses.
So here they're leaving home, they're going out the doorway and into the morning. So as a metaphor, this works as leaving their creative freedom behind. And as I was saying for the rest of the song, it can be interpreted as being about sacrificing the idea of little Beethoven, or at least for now, in order to make pop records, to resurrect their career. So it's like they're putting their creative ambitions on hold. But by the time we get to Let's Go Surfing at the end of the album, they're in this place that they don't want to be, this room that only Dickens could love, but they're looking forward to being able to catch this wave of creativity that never ends. And then there's the closing song.
He came home, and instead of hearing the usual drums and bass, he heard.
So he came home to hear Senseless Violins. And you know what that reminds me of?
Home, my baby's taking me home. My baby's taking me home. My baby's taking me home. Home, my baby's taking me home. My baby's taking me home. My baby's taking me home. My baby's taking me home.
This song is the centrepiece of Little Beethoven, and it famously repeats the same line over and over. It sounds mysterious and completely unknowable, but then when put in the context of Gratuitous sax and Senseless violins, it becomes the culmination of a long journey towards creative freedom. In the Sparks Brothers documentary, there are short segments for each of the band's albums, and when we get to Little Beethoven, that's the first time we're invited into the home recording studio of Ron and Russell Mael. Here, Russell explains that Little Beethoven was the first time that they could record an album in its entirety and present it to a record label for them to take or leave. So in that sense, it was the first time that the brothers achieved true creative freedom. That's reflected on the song I Married Myself, because here they're talking about not needing anybody else. It's about true independence. And of course that evokes imagery of the home as well, because that talks about long, long walks on the beach and candlelit dinners home. So with Little Beethoven, they set a new year zero for the band, and effectively they caught a wave that still hasn't ended to this day. So I hope you've enjoyed what I've got to say about Gratuitous sax and beyond. There's still a big chunk missing from this story because I'm yet to say anything about the album Balls, and that is just as fascinating in that each song can be tied into a narrative about the brothers sacrificing their own record deal in order to get themselves in a position to make Little Beethoven. So there's still lots more to come from me. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If so, please like and subscribe, and I'd love to hear your comments. I've got a blog as well where I've gone into more detail about this stuff. And yeah, thank you for watching. Cheers, bye.